And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. So let's go around the world right now, and we begin with the conflict now brewing and intensifying between India and Pakistan here. Take a look at this. This is a live vantage point right now there. It's almost 7 in the morning there in the Punjab province. And this shows the aftermath there of a strike by India. And so this is as daylight breaks there. We want to get into this story. We're going to keep this live vantage point up. But in the meantime, this was the scene. Take a look at this. All right, so this is what we know. India said it attacked 9 sites in Pakistan and Pakistani Kashmir today, where strikes against it had been planned, and Pakistan reported at least 3 people died and 12 people were injured. That was according to an initial assessment. We now know, according to the Associated Press, these strikes inside Pakistan by these Indian missiles killed 8 people. Now, the offensive occurred amid heightened tensions between the nuclear-armed neighbors in the aftermath of an attack on Hindu tourists in Indian Kashmir last month. Now, the statement from the Indian side said this: a little while ago, the Indian Armed Forces launched Operation Sindoor, hitting terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, from where terror attacks against India have been planned and directed. The statement went on to say, our actions have been focused, measured, and non-escalatory in nature. No Pakistani military facilities have been targeted. India has demonstrated considerable restraint in selection of targets and method of execution. So in the meantime, there you see some of the nighttime scenes of these strikes, quite something there. But in the meantime, this was asked of President Trump in the Oval Office today. These remarks are very brief. He didn't have much information. He was just learning about it when the reporter asked the question here. Let's listen.
No, it's a shame. We just heard about it just as we were walking in the doors of the Oval. Just heard about it. I guess people knew something was going to happen based on a little bit of the past. They've been fighting for a long time. You know, they've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it. No, I just hope it ends very quickly.
Okay, so very brief there. He noted they've been fighting for many, many decades. He wants it to end as quickly as possible here. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying this: I'm monitoring the situation between India and Pakistan closely. I echo POTUS's comments earlier today that this hopefully ends quickly and will continue to engage both Indian and Pakistani leadership towards a peaceful resolution. Information is kind of coming in piecemeal. That's how these stories take place, and we're kind of sifting through, pouring through those very details. We're going to do that right now with national security analyst and expert and retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfer. He joins me. Hal, we got a lot to talk about, but this is most pressing, and it's literally breaking right now. We do have this live vantage point. Take a look at that there. It is very early on a Wednesday morning, but in the meantime, Hal, I want to stress this point. India, Pakistan, 2 nuclear-armed nations. That means they have nuclear stockpiles, and they're firing at each other, at least India is, in retaliation for this terror attack you and I discussed now, 2 weeks ago in India-controlled Kashmir that killed multiple tourists. This is India's response, is it not, Hal?
Andrew, this is very much India's response, and they've been saying they're going to do this. And frankly, when you have an attack like what happened in Kashmir, that tourist area where they went after tourists, I mean, just the way that they did it, you know, going through and having men, basically cite the Quran or basically, vocalize parts of the Quran, and if they couldn't do it, they cruelly executed them, in some cases in front of their loved ones. Just absolutely horrific. It struck a chord throughout India, and the visceral political reaction throughout India couldn't have been stronger. This is an interesting strike, though. They went after 9 targets, 9 terrorist targets, very specific, did not go after Pakistani military. facilities, even though they rhetorically have firmly said that Pakistan was behind the strike. They see these, and there's a lot of reasons to believe this, that they see that these terrorists were probably tied or supported by Pakistan or Pakistani's intelligence service. So, but they were very restrained in how they did this. Now, they initially it sounded like they just went after the Kashmir and Jammu provinces or areas that are controlled by Pakistan. But now it's clear that they went actually beyond that to hitting some areas in Pakistan proper. At least one or two targets may have been outside of the Jammu and the Kashmir, Pakistan-controlled areas. So that's a little bit beyond what was initially reported. There's also a report unconfirmed. The Pakistanis say that they shot down 2 Indian jet fighters. That means that India has taken some significant losses in conducting the strike. Again, that is unconfirmed. And then there is also a report of a large explosion in Srinagar, which is the largest Indian-controlled city in the Kashmir province. So there was a big explosion. Don't know what it was. Don't know if it was something the Pakistanis did or a terrorist group did, or it could have been anything. It could have been something that the Indians launched and it didn't go well and it landed somehow in a major urban area or an urban area in Kashmir, and just don't know, or it could have been something else. But
Okay.
there was an explosion that was in the Indian-controlled Kashmir area as well.
So, Hal, a couple follow-up questions here. And you're right. This live vantage point we're getting right now from the Associated Press, this is in the Punjab province of Pakistan. So that's not in Pakistani-controlled Kashmir, if I have that correct. And,
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's where this vantage point is coming from here. So you say that you don't say, India says, no military targets were struck, only terror targets. What's the difference?
Well, a military target, at least the way I think that India is describing it, would be a military installation or a military facility, something like a base, or if they had a military outpost, maybe a major weapon system that was deployed somewhere or something like that. That would be a classic military target. They say they're hitting terrorist targets. Now, when they're hitting terrorist targets, that brings in some other questions, which is, could there have been, say, some other element of the Pakistani government at these targets? For example, could the Pakistani ISI, their big intelligence service that has a long history of supporting separatists or terrorists in the Kashmir area, could they have been at some of these locations? That I don't know. That I don't know that the Pakistanis would ever admit that that was the case. But there'd be something I certainly wouldn't rule out as a possibility, even if they were there coincidentally with the strike. I don't rule that out because if you look at how these terrorist groups, Jamaat Islamiyah, which basically the ostensibly those responsible, the Kashmiri resistance group was a breakoff of that original group. And by the way, that was the group that attacked Mumbai back in 2008.
Oh.
And so I don't rule that out. I don't rule out that they would have also hit Lashkar-e-Taiba directly as well, because I'm not sure if they think they're really a breakoff group or they're still all operating together.
So, and Hal, there's a lot of history to some of these conflicts. No doubt this one that goes back 50, 60 years with India, with Pakistan here. And are the fault lines with some of these terror groups operating in the region, are some of those fault lines on an extremist ideological basis?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're Islamic extremists. That for the terrorists involved, all right, this is a Hindu versus Muslim fight. This is if you look at India when it broke apart, 47, 48, well, 47, when the Indian Raj, if you will, the British Raj of India, basically split into Pakistan and India. India was Hindu, and Pakistan was Muslim, and then you run into the Kashmir, which is 70% Muslim, but the Maharaja that ruled the Kashmir province was Hindu.
Okay.
And he did not want to become part of Pakistan. And that's why you have his decision was to stay with India. And as I don't want to get into all the wars and everything else, but that's why you have different areas controlled, some controlled by Pakistan, some controlled by India. And if you get up to the Himalayas, there's actually some areas of Kashmir that are controlled by China.
Right. So, Hal, these are border disputes with underlying extremist ideological tensions, to your point, between Muslim ideology and Hindu ideology there. And we could get into that. We could talk about that all day here. And that is what was underlying the kind of initial terror attack in India-controlled Kashmir that killed more than 20 people. And that is why India felt the need to respond today. And I have to ask you this. Let's bring it back here stateside, the United States. What is our role here? This is a very restive world. Does the United States need another cross-border conflict to remedy? And if so, if the question is, if the reality is yes, because we can't do that, what is our role? What can we do to calm this?
Well, what I would say is this. Our role here is to try and calm this down so it does not escalate between two nuclear armed powers. Each of these countries has over 170 nuclear weapons. That is a tremendous amount of nuclear firepower that could be unleashed on each side. And this is the thing with nukes, all right, with nuclear weapons. These are extraordinarily powerful weapons. We have seen this in the past. That's why there is no above ground nuclear testing since the early 60s, was because we recognize that these above ground tests were basically launching so many radioactive particles into the atmosphere. It was posing a threat to public safety and to public health worldwide. So that was one of the first things where you saw the Russians and the U.S. actually came together. And we said, okay, and the French, I should mention as well, all came together and said, no more above ground nuclear testing because we recognize the threat. Now, that was with like one nuclear test, once in a while. This is something where you'd see something massive that could go out there. And there's been, with a large, massive onslaught of nuclear weapons, it kicks up so much, if you want to say smoke, material, whatever you want to call it, into the upper, into the stratosphere, that it actually will cool down the planet. And you can actually have what we call a nuclear winter, where not only do you have all the nuclear particles, which pose a health risk on one end, but you're also cooling down the Earth, the atmosphere such that you'll have massive crop failures, which could lead to worldwide famine. So let's just say there's a lot of reasons why the U.S. does not want this to escalate. And hopefully, I know that Pakistan and India understand this very well. In 2002, I was the director of intelligence of a multinational task force that was responsible for consequence management of a potential nuclear conflict somewhere in the Middle East. Pakistan was in our area of responsibility. There were heightened tensions then. It did de-escalate. It did fall back, and I do know both countries are fully aware of the potential risk posed by what could happen.
I see. So, according to Reuters, the Pakistani Foreign Ministry is responding, quote, in an unprovoked and blatant act of war. They say Indian fighter jets remained in Indian airspace, but violated Pakistan's sovereignty using standoff weapons targeting civilian population. That was the Pakistani Foreign Ministry. So, Hal, if India is telegraphing and saying we didn't strike any Pakistani military sites, Pakistan there in that statement I just read said civilians were targeted, albeit these strikes were conducted from Indian airspace. What's Pakistan's response going to be, if at all?
That actually is the big question. That's where you start to get into basically, scenario-driven sorts of planning and time. You're trying to work the odds of what they would do. It gets to be a very complex problem. You look at all the different things that they have arrayed. Could they do an airstrike or a missile strike similar to what India did, but on a smaller scale? That's very possible. They could do that. Could they do nothing? Well, that's actually possible too. And we have an example of that with Iran. Sure. After the second Israeli response to their missile strikes, when the Israelis went in after the second time and did such a rather comprehensive job going after the air defense systems. Despite all the rhetoric to the contrary, Iran has not responded to that. So that's a possibility, and it could be any gradation in between. And I got to put this out there. The other concern is that they might use some of these terrorists as proxies again to attack that area. And that, I don't think that de-escalates it at this point. I think that's really throwing, gasoline on the fire, so to speak.
All right. Yeah.